Hey, what is going on, everybody? I am getting ready to do part 2 of reading the book slowly. I'm just now trying to figure out this OBS stuff, so I want to make sure that there are no technical difficulties and that everybody can hear me. Jimmy Fast, how's it going? Hopefully you can hear this okay. If anybody's having any issues hearing me, or if there's no sound, or if the video isn't coming through clear, if you could let me know, that would be great. And let's go to here. Alright. Let's hop onto here to YouTube. And I'm just going to send a message in the chat. Alright, RF Hecky, it's good to have you in here. J.A. Street, Jim Ellison, Day, I don't recognize that name, but good to see you in here. Rob G. Alright, thank you guys for tuning in. And we're going to read this book slowly again. Sorry that I'm a little bit late. It took a little bit longer to get home. The kids wanted hot cocoa. The line was ridiculously long at McDonald's, so my wife tried to run in there, paid for the hot cocoa, went to go get the hot cocoa, and the machine was down. So then she had to deal with getting the money back and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm 14 minutes late, and sorry about that. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get right into this book. So where we had left off, we would be starting on important literature, and that's where we're gonna kick off at. If anybody else has any topics that they want me to cover, you know, towards the end of this or whatever, just at Rodney Greenway in the chat, so that way I can see it. If anybody, you know, catches anything that I'm reading and interprets it a different way, you know, same thing, just do an at Rodney Greenway so I can see it. Obviously, if you don't put my name, it'll get buried in the chat. But yeah, so that way, you know, we can kind of all brainstorm this stuff together. So real quick, I just wanted to throw a quick note out there. So I had a viewer comment. He's like, "Hey, you're not contributing anything by the way that you're doing this." So so just to clarify, what I'm trying to do is to read this book slowly, right, and look for anything that stands out, along with any interpretation of, you know, of what I think Fenn had meant. But at the same time, just understand I'm trying to give you guys information without giving up something that I find important, if that makes sense. Trying to find the happy medium of, you know, not providing too little, but also not providing so much that it could potentially be disastrous for me or whatever. So on top of that, you know, I'm reading it word for word. You guys might hear stuff or interpret it a different way that you can apply to your search. So I know like a lot of the searchers don't have the book yet, and I think the book is critical to have. So for the people that don't have the book but are in the chase, I think this is probably, you know, it's probably useful to them. It's an insight into Forrest's thoughts without having the book. But also, with that being said, I can't read the whole thing through because, you know, then it'll be an audiobook pretty much, and, you know, you got the copyright issues and audio rights. So in order for this to be fair use, I have to you know, throw my commentary in there every so often, right? So pretty much this copyrighted book is being used for educational purposes, so I can't read the thing straight out. All right, the photo on page 8, he is at San Lazaro, not at the turquoise mine. All right, page 8. So, is there a way that you arrived at that conclusion, or did you see the photo posted somewhere else, from like a Google advanced search going back in time or anything like that? I mean, I can see what kind of looks like old ruins and stuff in the back, but it's more like old cobblestones and just, like caliche type, like New Mexico type dirt. But yeah, if he is at San Lazaro, I'd like to know, just so I know for myself. I don't think that the chest is in San Lazaro. I think that the chest is north of Santa Fe, but that information might be useful one way or another. All right, so if you do have the books, or if you do have the thrill of the chase and you want to, open it up and follow along with me, especially for anybody that has anything other than, let's see here, the 8th printing is what I have. So if you have, a prior or later version of that, and you want to read along read along with me, and then that way, we can know if something is different. I don't think a lot of people have talked about differences, but doing like a book club type side-by-side reading, that's how we would definitely be able to find out if there is subtle differences in the book. But anyways, enough intro and yakking my jaw and all that. I'm going to get right into it. All right, so page 9, important literature, and it's got Forrest on the left side page, signing, autographing books at what is supposed to be the turquoise mine. R.F. Hecky says that it's possibly San Lazaro. So hopefully she'll put that information up about how she got there, and we can check it out. All right, so important literature. Looking at the title, right? The first thing that we have to ask ourselves is, why is it important? And the first time reading this through, you wouldn't really come to that conclusion, right? But as we read through the pages, we realize that Forrest doesn't consider the literature that he's talking about important. First of all, I think he does. I think he does like Hemingway and Fitzgerald, but that's not how he makes it out to be in this. All right, let me take a drink real quick. All right, so I'm going to put this up real quick. All right, important literature. I still think about education sometimes, especially now that it's too late to get any. But with all of my days now, in the fullness of time, it seems prudent to do a little investigating about higher things. All right, I'm going to stop right there. All right, so he says he still thinks about education, especially now that he's far beyond that in his life. And he says, with all of my days now. So with all of my days, meaning like through the many years, right? And in the fullness of time means like after time has passed. So like in all of my years, right? And throughout my time, pretty much. Says it seems prudent to do a little investigating. So prudent is like it's almost like synonymous with important. All right, so I'm gonna pull this up real quick, just because just like Forrest says, we don't know the meaning of words, and obviously all words have multiple meanings. But if we look at it in the context that it's in, right, and he tells us that a lot. People don't know the meaning of words. People don't know the meaning of words. So we're gonna, every time we come across a word that's different or not everyday vocabulary, we're gonna go over it. All right, so prudent as an adjective, acting with or showing care and thought for the future. All right, so he's saying, well, let me pull up one more. All right, so characterized by, arising from, or showing prudence, such as marked by wisdom or judiciousness, shrewd in the management of practical affairs, marked by circumspection, and pretty much says like, while it seems important that I look towards or look into education for, I don't know how to word it. So, but with all of my days now in the fullness of time, it seems prudent to do a little investigating about higher things. So looking toward the future, right, seems imperative or important that he does a little investigating about higher things. The question is, what are the higher things? Now, we had talked in my first video, there was a Socratic theory that I had talked about right here. But life for Eric was just a rule of thumb anyways, and he was philosophical about it all. Alright, so if you look up higher things, right, Socrates ends up coming up. Alright, same thing with philosophical, right? It brings them up in both situations. So that there might be something important in there. And also, we really got to look at what he's saying. But with all of my days now in the fullness of time, it seems prudent to do a little investigating about higher things. So it's imperative to do a little investigating. So is this a way of him to tell us to do a little investigating? Right? Seems prudent to do a little investigating. So it's like he's telling us to look into things. Because I wasn't in college, I didn't get to read any of the great books that were written by really important writers. Those guys like Hemingway and Fitzgerald, whom everyone looked up to. So he's telling us that they're really important writers and looked up to. Like I said in my first video, every time I come across the word important, right, or something that hints towards something being to catch your eye, right, to really, he's drawing you into certain aspects of something. So it's not a matter of him saying that he didn't get to read any of the books that were written by really important writers, those guys like Hemingway and Fitzgerald, whom everyone looked up to. I think he's telling us to look up these important writers, right? Maybe it's a respect thing, like the sheriff who told the outlaw he was going to hang him with a new rope because he respected him so much. So there is a, let me make sure I have it. I lost all of my freaking sticky notes, but that line is from something. All right, I'm gonna have to get you guys that, but that's actually a quote, right? It's like a old Western type saying, like, I'll hang you with a new rope because I respect you so much, which is weird because if you look up the term hang you with a new rope, it's actually like an insult, because a new rope doesn't have the type of play in it that would be needed to hang somebody in a peaceful manner. It's actually like a lot more violent. But if you Google search hang you with a new rope because I respect you so much, and you do some digging around, there was an old Western film. Man, I wish I had this on me. But it's in there, right? And whoever starred in it, I wish I had that freaking sticky note. Whoever starred in it, I'm assuming, has a connection with Fitzgerald and Hemingway, at least up to this point. Alright, but pretty much on top of that, he's fitting it in there because he's saying, like, maybe those writers were really important just out of respect, right? They writ a few good novels in their day, and then they happened to, to blow up. But the novels that he talks about in here were, like, the first ones that, or the ones that actually like got them on people's radars. All right, so one day when it was raining, I went to Borders to see about those books. I just wanted to look at one and hold it for a while. That's how old guys are, you know. Maybe I should have stayed in school and studied more. History doesn't reveal the alternatives, so I might have been a great writer for all I know, or even a great something better than that. All right, so that history doesn't reveal the alternatives. Einstein said something extremely similar to this. He's like, I might have been a good blah 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 or a good blah blah blah. Pretty much saying that the same thing that Fenn says in here. All right. Okay, I'm gonna leave that one at that. I have to like pick and choose. There's stuff in here that I found and stuff that I'm gonna try to stray away from, but without like screwing you guys over. Alright, just as I was about to ask the little girl at the computer about those authors, she raised her coffee cup to take a sip. And I swear that cup all but covered her whole face. I thought maybe she was trying to hide. Anyway, when she finished sipping, she gave me a nice smile that made me feel better and asked me to please follow her as she regaled me with reasons why we are so lucky to have great books in our lives. So he's saying that the person that he's approaching, the employee, he feels that she's trying to hide from him behind her coffee cup, but she smiled and he felt better about it, and now she's doing her whole sales pitch thing. Then he says, I already knew that no person has ever been accused of understatement, so there was no reason for me to listen to her, but I did anyway. So right here, there was no reason for me to listen to her, but I did anyway. Going back. Anyway, when she finished sipping, she gave me a nice smile that made me feel better and asked me to please follow her. Obviously, she's going to those books, right? Those are the books that Fenn is trying to locate. And asked me to please follow her as she regaled me with reasons why we are so lucky to have great books in our lives. Then he says, I knew no salesperson has ever been accused of understatement, so there was no reason for me to listen to her, but I did anyway. Now later on in the book, we're going to learn that Forrest says that the only people that he has to listen to are people that are paying his bills, pretty much. So I'm really thinking that this line right here is implying to listen to what the woman said and relate that to what we had just figured out about those great writers, right? Because it is really important. Hence, that's why the title of this chapter is called Important Literature. He's telling us that this chapter is important literature, not the books were important literature. So there's something within this chapter that has to do with all the people that Forrest is talking about that will bring us to arrive at a certain connection, I think. The little lady, and we're going to confirm it right here. I'm going to change my webcam just a little bit. All right. I don't like that it's that high. All right. Okay. That little lady probably knew where every book was in that whole store. And when we arrived at the exact spot, she pulled down 2 books and then just handed them to me and walked away, tossing her thick braids back and forth like they had purpose. Her braids have a purpose for whatever Forrest is trying to convey to us, the message that he's trying to get across right now. Anything that's important, purposeful, he listens to, paid attention, those are comments towards us, right? She didn't even say goodbye or anything, but I noticed that she felt really proud because I could see it in her strut, and it was obvious that she'd graduated from a good school somewhere. Where is somewhere, and what about her strut is making it obvious that she'd graduated from good school, you know? Okay. So now I'm holding copies of For Whom the Bell Tolls and The Great Gatsby, and standing right in the middle of the bookstore with people all around. I didn't dare look to see who was staring, but finally when I sneaked a peek, no one was watching. So right here, could Forrest be telling us about the location that he hid the treasure, right? And I think that's what Forrest is talking about. There's no sound in here? Hold on. Can everybody hear me okay? Because the microphone's showing up on mine. I'm not gonna continue until I know for sure. And all right, can everybody hear me in the chat? There is sound. Okay, cool. All right, so the aberrations and the abstracts that Forrest is talking about in his comments, this is the type of stuff that I think he's talking about. So right now he's describing the incident of where he had hid his treasure. He's not telling us where, but kind of like what he went through. So now I'm holding copies of For Whom the Bell Tolls and The Great Gatsby, and standing right in the middle of the bookstore with people all around. I didn't dare look to see who was staring, but finally, when I sneaked a peek, no one was watching. So he's in the clear. They were all just holding books and reading for free. To be a little candid, I thought it was rude of them to read with no thought of buying or anything. Stores have to make a living too. The two books I held that had such big reputations were about 6 inches tall and 4 inches wide and really thin. I was so amazed that they were paperbacks. I didn't understand how two guys who were big shots could get by with writing such little books. I'd written 8 books and all of them were much larger and cost a lot more money, and nobody has ever heard of me. So I've noticed a trend in the people that Forrest talks about, right? And the trend is that the people that he talks about really aren't known. You know, they were really important, and over time they were just forgotten about. Like I'm sure we've all heard of, you know, For Whom the Bell Tolls or The Great Gatsby, but nobody could, and they were such great books, you know, like that's why we have all grown up hearing the title. But what we never learned about or heard of was the people that wrote those books, right? Like Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald. And later on when we get into, you know, John Charles, you know, the John Charles that he's talking about was a very famous person in his day, even more so than Lewis and Clark. But all throughout school, we only learned about Lewis and Clark. And the people just kind of get lost throughout time. Hold on for a second. This and that. Okay. And that. Okay. I'd written 8 books and all of them were much larger and cost a lot more money, and nobody has ever heard of me. If it hadn't have been for the honor of the thing, I'd probably just put the books right back on the shelf and walked out. But everyone would have noticed, so I had to stand in the checkout line behind a bunch of middle-aged looking people. Some of them were women, because I suppose all the middle-aged looking guys were at work someplace or doing something else. That part, you know, just now as I'm reading it, it might be important here in a second when he takes his second trip to Borders. I don't think they go to bookstores much. Well, you could almost guess how slow the dumb line was moving. The only register guy in the place was showing more patience than I felt at the moment, while two borderline biddies were preoccupied with some kind of breathtaking nonsense at the expense of my time and patience. So here again, we have borders, we have borderline, some kind of breathtaking nonsense at the expense of my time and patience. So borderline, border, breathtaking. I think it's kind of important. Finally, they selected a couple of impulse oddments, and the line started moving again. It was hard not to think of what people have to go through when they get old. It doesn't matter that teenagers have to stand in line for hours because they have so much time left. But for old guys who are pretty much covered up with their lives already, it's a different story. Life can be so rude that way. So he has life can be so rude that way. And then we have life is like that sometimes, and death is always too harsh. He makes all these comments towards life. Pretty much how, life's a bee and then you die type thing. When I got around to reading that Bell Tolls book, I thought it was just plain. Alright, we're going to talk about that Bell Tolls book. Alright, so first of all, it's For Whom the Bell Tolls, which we all know. But Bell Tolls isn't capitalized, it's not italicized, and it has no quotations around it. I thought it was just plain. So we have bell, tolls, and plane, right? Could he be hinting towards a plane that has to do with bells, right? Or maybe, toll roads are like paying a toll at freaking Bell Plane or something like that. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it all out, but there's stuff that I'm finding in this book that is definitely it's coming across more as like hints towards a location than it is just telling a story, if that makes sense. All right. The story was about this guy who was an ambulance driver in World War I, and he was in love with a nurse. All right. For Whom the Bell Tolls is not about this guy who was an ambulance driver and who was in World War I, and who was in love with a nurse. That story that he's talking about is A Farewell to Arms, not For Whom a Bell Tolls. But guess what? A Farewell to Arms is also written by Ernest Hemingway. So this technically would be an aberration, right? This is something different, which is the exact, the exact definition that Forrest gave us, as well as Google. So we're going to look it up one more time, just to clarify. Alright. Aberration definition. A departure from what is normal, usual, or expected. Alright, next one. Characteristic that deviates from the normal type. And the apparent displacement. Now that's astronomy and stuff. But pretty much it's saying, something that isn't normal or something that's different. Well, right there in that line, he's giving us something different from what is correct or what is normal. There was lots of killing and mud and bombs and dead horses. Now that line right there is written, has no punctuation. No punctuation. It just doesn't sound right, but that's the exact way that Hemingway sounded when he would write. So in each part of these sections, right, when he's talking about a book that was written by one of those important writers, he copies that writing style to kind of really stand out to you. I read about a third of that thing and couldn't force myself any longer. Who did this Hemingway guy think he was anyways? He's asking us a question. I think every time he's asking us a question, I don't necessarily think it's rhetorical. Maybe Hemingway legitimately thought that he was somebody, right? And he kind of had an ego about him from what I read about him. I read about a third of that and couldn't force myself any longer. So maybe we need to get the book and read a third of it and see what within that third could possibly connect with what we're doing. I didn't think his book was even sort of good, and what made it worse was that the Gatsby thing wasn't much better. So now this time, right, Gatsby is capitalized, even though Bell Tolls wasn't, but it's not in quotations or italicized or anything. Those two writers were so overrated, I couldn't believe it. I could have been embarrassed for both of them if I thought it'd help, but the college professors always assigned these books, so there certainly was that to think about. So he's telling us to think about it. He's telling us to think about why the college professors always assigned these books. He's asking us who Hemingway thought he was. He's telling us that we have to read a third of that book and look for anything that helps us. He's telling us that we need to listen to the clerk that said follow her while she regaled him with reasons, and he knew he didn't have to listen to her, but he listened to her anyways because he's saying that we need to listen to her, and she arrived at the exact spot that they were looking for. But finally, I just tossed those beauties in the trash basket under my desk and looked away. If Robert Redford had written anything, he probably could have done it better than the guy who wrote that Gatsby book. The guy that wrote that Gatsby book is F. Scott Fitzgerald, right? And here's another aberration, because Robert Redford did write a book, and that book was called The Outlaw Trail, which has a heck of a lot to do with, or heck of a lot in common with, like the sheriff who told the outlaw he would hang him with a new rope because he respected him so much. So there's just so many synchronicities in here, you know, like it cannot be a coincidence. There's something that we need to pay attention to. So Robert Redford did write a book, The Outlaw Trail. It's a pretty cool book about the journey that him and some friends took. All right, not having gone to college began to take on a whole new meaning now, and I was reinforced in the belief that I had hardly missed anything. You know, just like the previous chapter when his dad asked him that question. You know, he was just standing there by the car doing something really important, and he said it to me out of the blue. You know, who would you rather have working on your car? A guy who graduated from 4 years of mechanic school, or a guy who has been working on broken cars? My dad would ask me stuff like that my dad would ask me stuff like that I didn't know how to answer, but somehow make it seem all right. We both knew I wasn't going to college. Him because he didn't think I could make it, and me because I didn't think I could make it. So his dad's telling him stuff like that because he knows he's not going to college, but he wants Forrest to feel reassured in the belief that he isn't going to miss anything. Then he says, besides, some of the things I do pretty good, I'm better at than some of those college guys are at what they do pretty good. It's a heck of a sentence, trying to say it. No punctuation, just sounds completely off. These sentences that are just like crazy weird, I think those are also ones to pay attention to. Alright, well, as fate would make it happen, the very next morning, all the news was about this guy, J.D. Salinger, who had just died. Man, I thought I just found the hang you with a new rope thing, but I guess I didn't. Alright, everyone on TV was talking about how he had revolutionized writing novels in his day, and so on. Here's the thing about J.D. Salinger is I don't think he would have been the revolutionary necessarily, right? The revolutionaries would have been F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway. And J.D. Salinger got all of his inspiration from those two. All right, Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald were associates, right? They weren't friends, but they weren't enemies. They tended to kind of influence each other, along with giving each other a hard time and all that. J.D. Salinger also met up with Ernest Hemingway a couple times. I'm not sure about if he ever met F. Scott Fitzgerald or not, but all three of them hold some sort of connection in the sense that they all influenced and inspired each other. And if you read For Whom the Bell Tolls, or even the poem For Whom the Bell Tolls, there's this belief that there's a line in the book saying, like, if one person dies, a part of me dies, type thing, saying that everybody on this world, or on this earth, is interconnected and all living through each other. And that's kind of the relationship that Hemingway, Fitzgerald, and Salinger all shared together, which the philosophy of it kind of really goes right along with what Socrates was saying about higher things in his Socratic theory. So the news said he was very secretive about what he did, and even Diane Sawyer mentioned that he'd written a lot of books and had hidden some in a vault so no one could read them. He seemed like my kind of guy, but I couldn't figure out how he could be such an important writer when I'd never even heard of him. So again, he's telling us the importance of him, but he's also telling us that he couldn't figure it out, and he's telling us to figure it out. Figure out why J.D. Salinger was such an important writer, but none of us had ever heard of him. So, at Borders the next day, it was still raining, so I just wandered around the store. I didn't spend much time in the children's section, or cooking, or travel. Finally, I found the area I was looking for and pulled out Catcher in the Rye. It was an average-looking book, about the size of the two I'd thrown in the trash, but it seemed better to me because I didn't expect much from it. Alright, so again, he's at Borders. It's still raining, and he's wandering around, and while he's wandering around, he's not spending much time in the children's section, or cooking, or travel. Okay? And he found the area that he was looking for. Now, this is the biggest thing that caught my eyes. He said, it seemed better to me because I didn't expect much from it. So part of me is wondering if Forrest knew where he wanted to hide the chest, but this is when he found it, right? He's wandering around looking for the hiding place, and the first two that he happened to stop at weren't good, right? He didn't like them. He's like, this is not the right spot. But as he's wandering around, he finds a location that seems better because he wasn't expecting much from it. So I strolled over to the checkout guy, who probably remembered me from the day before. When I handed him the book and my credit card, he said in a loud voice, Catcher in the Rye. That idiot. So now everyone in the whole dumb store started staring at me and not him. He's the one that said it, not me, but that didn't make any difference. Some women were sniffering and others were just grinning. It was all so rude that I just looked away. That taught them. So, right here, with the way that he just words that, with the way that he words it, hurry up, you gotta, so with the way that he words it, right there, go, honey.
I can't find his cage.
What do you mean you can't find his cage? My daughter's bringing our hedgehog in, so just stand tight for a minute. His cage is in there, right? Or it's in the laundry room. I think it's in the laundry room.
I After that, can you fly your drone?
No, because you'll probably be sleeping.
No.
Go, honey. All right. Shut the door. Sorry about this. Okay. So, no, I didn't pause it. All right, so when I handed him the book and my credit card, he said in a loud voice, "Catcher in the Rye." That idiot. So now everyone in the whole dumb store started staring at me and not him. He's the one that said it, not me, but that didn't make any difference. That is exactly how Holden Caulfield talks in Catcher in the Rye. So just like there was lots of killing and mud and bombs and dead horses that he is implying towards Hemingway, he's also doing the same thing with J.D. Salinger's style of writing, right? He's getting into character for every book that he's talking about. So some women were sniffering and others were just grinning. It was all so rude that I just looked away. That taught them. That, again, Holden Caulfield right there. The loudmouth checkout guy thought what he had done was real clever. He was probably on something, and I don't think it was Ovaltine. Again, a line from the book. He just stood there making his $6.50 an hour and picking on elderly gentlemen such as myself. Don't you just hate guys like that? I've never been able to find a place where I couldn't embarrass myself, and this store was now number 1 on the list. So when I was reading this yesterday, and I'm considering the fact that he's talking about his hiding location or going to his hiding location, and he's talking about how he's wandering around, not spending much time in cooking or travel or children's, right? And how he meets this guy that he's trying to pay, and the guy is making fun of elderly gentlemen such as himself. And it really got me thinking, is Forrest Fenn talking about a tourist location, kind of, that has a senior citizens discount, and the guy, he's collecting it or whatever, but now Forrest feels embarrassed. Now remember, the first few chapters that we had read were talking about how he continues to feel young, right? And he does it by ignoring the fact that his body is aging. And now some guy that he's trying to pay is pointing out the fact that he's an elderly gentleman. So I'm wondering if he's actually discussing a place that has a senior citizen discount. And it's a place that isn't necessarily for children, right? Isn't really known for cooking, or and it's not like it's not in a top 10 most traveled to places in Yellowstone, because he didn't spend much, or not in Yellowstone, but in the Rocky Mountains, and he said he didn't spend much time in the cooking, travel, or children's section. So it really makes me wonder. Well, the first sentence read, if you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born, and what my lousy childhood was like, and how my parents were occupied and all that before they had me, and all that Copperfield kind of crap. But I don't feel like going into it if you want to know the truth. So right there, and I never noticed this, but this is a line. Well, I knew this was a line from the book, but there's one little slip up that Fenn makes while talking about this sentence. Hold on. She did. Okay. I guess my hedgehog was just dropped. So, R.F. Hecky pointed out in a video the other day after my my reading the book slowly part 1, she talks about this sentence, and David is missing, right? David from David Copperfield is missing. So Forrest is he reads, right? That's all he does. And he can sit there and his memory is like outstanding. He can tell a story from every single, piece of art that he has. He's telling all these stories from when he was like 5 years old or whatever, if they really are stories. And then he messes up things like the plot of For Whom the Bell Tolls, and he gets the entire first sentence of Catcher in the Rye correct, but forgets David. I don't think that that's something that Forrest would do unintentionally, right? So he's doing it on purpose because he's telling us to look for anything that stands out or anything that's different. I thought, what a great way to start a book. Just get right down into the fling of it. So I read some more, and then I read the whole book. The story was about this guy who wandered around the streets in Manhattan a lot, had been thrown out of a few schools, and thought his classmates were idiots. And then you know what? The more I thought about it, the more I realized the book was about me, and I couldn't believe it. How would anyone imagine a coincidence like that? Now remember, imagination is more important than knowledge, but he's asking us a question, and some of these questions it might be important for us to answer. This one might be rhetorical or whatever, but again, he's asking us something for a reason. He's wanting that part to stand out. Hold on a second. All right. How would anyone imagine a coincidence like that could happen? Admittedly, the places in JD's book were different from mine, and the names were different, and the time was different from mine, and the schools I never heard about were obviously different, but other than that, it was my very own storyline. He even had a sister like mine. The guy in the story, I mean, not JD. He always does that. He says, I mean. When he talks about his dad holding his hand or whatever, and I was praying thanks to Thor, and stuff like that. But, so he's trying to re-emphasize on the guy in the story, right? Now, the schools that he never heard about was because the schools in the book were imaginary, right? Or they were fake. Besides, what school was it? I can't remember what school. There's I think it was Princeton, maybe. They talk about a Princeton in there, but everything else was like made up stuff. And it was so funny, and I mean really funny, because I always thought I'd write that book myself. Only I'd put a lot more in it, like things I did in school, some of which would not be too complimentary. That's why I was going to call it an unauthorized biography, if that's the right word. So, what's the right word? Unauthorized or biography? Because I'm leaning more towards unauthorized. That's the right word. And he's doing this because, or he's bringing this up because, again, we're researching into J.D. Salinger, right? He's telling us to look into these writers, right? And as we're looking them up, we're reading stuff about them, and we're coming across stuff, and we're like, yeah, whatever, that doesn't really apply to me, or doesn't do me any good. And then we go back to reading Fenn's book, and then we come across stuff like that. He was going to write a book like that himself, and it was going to include other stuff which isn't too complimentary because he has a slight penchant for provocation or whatever, and that's why he was going to call it an unauthorized biography. Now, the reason why this is important to us is because J.D. Salinger literally, he sued everybody that tried to do any sort of spin-off of his books, that tried to, there was going to be a TV show called Catcher or whatever, something like that. and everybody got taken to court. People were trying to, write a biography about J.D. Salinger and stuff like that. And pretty much what had happened was it became unauthorized for anybody to replicate any sort of workings similar to J.D. Salinger's. And that's why Forrest is including that in there. It's not that he was really going to write a book and call it an unauthorized biography. But here's the thing. That's why I was going to call it an unauthorized biography, but unauthorized autobiography isn't even capitalized. It's not in quotations. It's not capitalized. So obviously he's not talking about a book title, right? He was going to call it an unauthorized autobiography because he was ripping J.D. Salinger's work off, and it is unauthorized for him to do so. But I'd have to tell everything straight because nothing is worse than facts written wrong. Just because Napoleon said that history is nothing more than fables agreed upon doesn't mean it's true. Alright, nothing is worse than facts written wrong. Just because Napoleon said history is nothing more than fables agreed upon doesn't make it true. Well, if nothing is worse than facts written wrong, and Forrest is writing a fact about Napoleon that's wrong, because Napoleon didn't say history is nothing more than fables agreed upon. Napoleon said history is nothing more than lies agreed upon. So here is another aberration, right? Something for us to pay attention to. But we would not know that Napoleon had said that unless we looked up the stuff that Forrest quotes, right? He's telling us just because Napoleon said that history is nothing more than fables agreed upon doesn't mean it's true. He's telling us doesn't mean it's true. So he's telling us to look up what Napoleon said. If it's super like you really got to catch him. You got to be able to see like what he's pointing towards in order to find these aberrations or whatever. As far as them being hints and stuff, I don't know. I would imagine a hint to be a lot more easy. Actually, there were two reasons why I never got around to writing my book. One was because I always had other important things to do, and making plans was antagonistic to freedom. But the other reason was more important. My self-confidence was really down at the bottom. So, was that unauthorized autobiography the autobiography that Fenn had put inside the treasure chest? And when he says that he never got around to writing it, is he talking about both the autobiography and hiding the chest because more important things came in and out of his life? Talking about like his family and his cancer getting better, and the plan was just antagonistic to him living his life how he wanted to live his life and not have to worry about putting the treasure out there and all that stuff. Or maybe he's talking about his plan of committing suicide, right? And obviously the chest, along with his autobiography, were going to be there. So maybe he didn't plan to commit suicide. He was just going to do it whenever he felt comfortable. But he didn't feel comfortable at the time because his self-confidence was really down at the bottom, right? He was at rock bottom as far as confidence and esteem goes, or self-esteem goes. Then he says, but the other reason was more important. My self-confidence was really down at the bottom. So two things, all right? Actually, there were two reasons why I never got around to writing my book. One was because I had other important things to do, and making plans is antagonistic to freedom. But the other reason was more important. My self-confidence was really down at the bottom. So, the bottom of where? So is there like an esteem creek or an esteem canyon? By the way, I don't think that the poem is literal at all. A kid I didn't like at all had given me a copy of Kismet to read, and he probably did it on purpose. The story was about this poet in Baghdad who was always picking some guy's pocket. and he was in trouble most of the time. The pickpocket guy, I mean. Who else would he mean? Some guy that's getting his pocket picked, he's the guy that's in trouble. So why does Forrest always tell us, like after he says something, he'll comma it and then he'll re-emphasize who he was talking about. So I didn't get around to looking at Kismet. I haven't looked it up, but I'm under the impression that it's a play, it's not like a book or anything. So the question is, who wrote Kismet? All right, let's go ahead and look it up right now. All right, Kismet, Destiny, Fate, Kismet, book. Let's try that. By A.E. Woodward. Yep. All right, looks like it's by a collection of people, maybe. Nope. Yeah. That's a Kindle edition. It says by A.E. Woodward, and that the author was Robin Harper, but then that says illustrator. Okay, so A.E. Woodward is the author, and Robin Harper was an illustrator. And I don't know if any of those guys have any connection with Fenn, or not with Fenn, but with Ernest Hemingway or anything. But we got a wood, right? If you are brave and in the wood, in ward, like we're traveling toward something. I don't know. I'm probably going off the deep end, but whatever. Pretty sure we've all been there. And Robin Harper. I'm going to look it up later. Maybe we'll talk about it on the next video that I do. Okay. Alright. Anyway, there's this line in the story. To the Caliph I am dirt, but to the dirt I am Caliph. Well, you know he had to be an educated guy to say something that good. But how would you like it if someone said you were dirt? Alright. So this is what we're going to do, is we're going to look up Caliph. I'm assuming it's ruler or something. The chief Muslim civil and religious ruler, regarded as the successor of Muhammad. The Caliph ruled in Baghdad until 1258 and then in Egypt until the Ottoman conquest of 1517. The title was then held by the Ottoman sultans until it was abolished in 1924 by Ataturk. Doesn't really tell a whole lot, but obviously if it's talking about Baghdad and it's talking about a ruler, or obviously it's something to do with the Muslim faith, if you will. How it applies to us, I don't know, but Forrest is including it in there for a reason. So maybe homework for everybody would be to check out, to read through Kismet and see what they find. Oh yeah, okay. And R.F. Hecky says that that's a misquote and that it should be maybe dirt, not I am dirt. Okay, so to the Caliph I may be dirt, but to the dirt I am a Caliph. Okay. Alright, so that's how it should go. Again, Forrest is getting something wrong, right? And unless we're looking up these quotations and these things that other people have said or whatever, if we're just taking Forrest's word for it, then we're not going to find the original source, right? Because that original source could have a connection to a place location, right? Same thing with his life is a game of poker and happiness is the pot. Fate deals you 4 cards and a joker and you play whether you like it or not. That is not Forrest's quote. It is a different quote entirely, and Forrest put it in completely different words. But unless we looked up life is a game of poker, if we're like, oh, that's a neat quote, I wonder where he got that from, and we Google it, then we won't find out that it was incorrect, right? And these incorrect lines or quotes or whatever are the aberrations, because they're something different. They're not normal. He says, but how would you like it if someone said you were dirt? Life is so unfair. Again, life's unfair. And it's rude. And life is too harsh. So life is so unfair. And people are always doing those things. Doing what things? Giving you a copy of Kismet to read, implying that you may be dirt, or picking some guy's pockets. I probably would still be down if JD had not insinuated that I should write my autobiography. How did JD insinuate that Forrest should write his autobiography? By starting the story that Forrest considered his own life, but not finishing it because the character stops at like 17 years old and Forrest continued on past that. Or was it just the fact that that JD says he doesn't want anybody writing using his style or doing any sort of adaptations of his work, and Forrest has a slight penchant for provocation and likes to, kind of egg people on or whatever, and that's why I said, all right, I'm going to write my own book. And I'm going to talk about J.D. Salinger, and in the book, I'm going to write exactly how Holden Caulfield spoke, just because I know that it's not a complete adaptation, but it's enough to say, like, hey, I technically did something that I wasn't supposed to do, right? Because that's what a maverick would do, live out there on the edges. Anyways, so I started to figure things out. Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. And I had a lot of that. Imagination, I mean. Again, imagination, I mean. So he's saying he doesn't have a lot of knowledge, he has a lot of imagination. And imagination is more important than knowledge. And we need imagination to solve the poem, right? But that's not where the quote stops. All right, so we're going to go to imagination is more important than knowledge, right? We're going to look up Einstein. And he says, imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited to all we know and understand, while imagination embraces the entire world and all there ever will be to know and understand. So, for knowledge is limited to all we know and understand. Now, if Forrest is telling us that imagination is more important than knowledge, and he agrees with what Einstein says, and he says that we need imagination to solve the poem, and Einstein is saying that knowledge is limited to all we know and understand, then in order to solve the poem, we need to stop applying all we know and understand, right? We know a canyon and we know what water means, but Einstein continues, while imagination embraces the entire world, just like Forrest said, try to look at the big picture. Imagination embraces the entire world and all there ever will be to know and understand. So, we shall not cease from our exploration until, that T.S. Eliot quote saying, and when we arrive, we'll know the place for the very first time, like pretty much implying you won't know until you know, but you can't use knowledge to figure it out. You got to use your imagination in order to decipher it. And if your imagination is operating, good, you still have a little bit of kid left in you, and you're still able to use your imagination. Once you solve the poem using your imagination, it'll click, and you'll know that place for the very first time. All right, Forrest says we have to be a maverick. I'm straying a little far off, but I want to bring it up because I think it's important. All right, a maverick. Definition of a maverick: an unbranded range animal. All right, so kind of like right along there with meat, right? It's an untamed horse, right? But then we also have this one: An independent individual who does not go along with a group or a party. Hold on, there's another really good one. Give me 2 seconds. An unorthodox or independent-minded person. Doesn't that sound a lot like a person that doesn't conform and is full of imagination? And if we look at the book, but it takes mettle enough to strike the trail and enough confidence in a maverick to know that the treasure is really there for the taking. And what's mettle? Mettle is pretty much the opposite of meek. It's pretty much synonymous with brave and bold. So I don't know. Is there connections here? I don't know. I'm willing to say yes. Anyways, I'm going to continue this chapter. All right. So he says, besides, nonfiction writers don't have to be right, but 85% of the time, and everyone knows that. How else can a person write a book? I don't know, by writing fiction? I never thought I had to believe everything I said, and if I had to look up a word, I just wouldn't use it. And because I'm so easily pleased, a lot of things are effortless for me. I had it all figured out. So just like Eric Sloane had everything figured out, and Forrest thought he was real clever, now Forrest has come to the point where he has everything figured out. Now, real quick about F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, and J.D. Salinger. They all adapted their own lives into their books, right? Like their beliefs, their struggles in life, things that were going on with them in life, so on and so forth, and they would also like add another character into the mix, like a real person. So they would use their experiences and then base the character off from another person. They'd mend them together, and then they would create this work of fiction. But in all actuality, it was basically a work of nonfiction, right? Because it is telling the true story of people, right? And that, I think Forrest might be doing the same thing. And that's why he says, this book is as true to history as one man can average out that truth, considering the fact that one of my natural instincts is to embellish just a little. So he's embellishing about his character. He might be implying or applying other attributes of other people to develop the character, but for the most part, going along with his storyline, but embellishing in a way that will make it fit to what to make the hints fit in a way that will allow us to solve the clues in the poem. And that's why there are aberrations in the book, because it's different. It's an alternative. It's different from the norm. It's not something that he went through, but it's an exaggeration or a twist or a play on words or actions in order to bring the story together. Then you have to question yourself, besides, nonfiction writers don't have to be right, but 85% of the time. And then, so do we just assume that the other 15% is lies and embellishments or stories or fables, right? History is nothing more than fables agreed upon. This book is as true to history as one man can average out that truth, but at the same time, history is nothing more than fables agreed upon, and a fable is a story, right? So the other 15% is nothing but stories or embellishments. How else can a person write a book? So he's saying he had to do that. He had to embellish in order to write this book. I never thought I had to believe anything I said, and if I had to look up a word, I just wouldn't use it. And because I'm so easily pleased, a lot of things are effortless for me. I had it all figured out. So when Catcher in the Rye was done, I threw it in the trash where it landed right on top of a Time magazine. I just needed some time to think, and the more I thought about J.D., the more I liked him. The only thing was, he'd left out some really important stuff about when I was a kid and doing different things. Maybe he just had it in mind that I'd finish the book, or at least add on to it. I don't think JD had that in mind, but I think if he was alive, he'd probably be angry to hear that. So I reached in the trash. I reached in the trash for Catcher. This time, Catcher is capitalized. Catcher is italicized. But meanwhile, a few pages back, Bell Tolls and Gatsby were just like, whatever. But is that because Forrest legitimately didn't like them? Or because he really wanted you to focus in on that little area? So I reached in the trash for Catcher and put it on my desk so everyone could see that I'd read it. I think my friend JD knows. And in a serious, determined way, I started to think about what to say. Alright, for this, so when Catcher in the Rye was done, I threw it in the trash where it landed right on top of a Time magazine. There is a sentence, like, exactly like this in Catcher in the Rye. I think it was talking about the Atlantic Monthly newspaper thrown on top of a Time magazine or something like that, and it's pretty much exactly what Forrest just said. So everything that he's saying in here, it really needs to be, studied upon, right? You need to study about Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald. Do I think it's a rabbit hole? I'm sure there's a lot of it that is, but there's one thing that is not a rabbit hole that we have to figure out. And that one thing is the fact that there is a connection between everybody mentioned within this chapter. That's why the chapter is titled Important Literature. That's why every other word out of Forrest's mouth is important, important, important. Pay attention, listen, think. So he's telling us we need to think, and we really need to go back and overlook and read through and double check and everything. Do I have... Man, I wish I had that, freaking hang you with a new rope thing. Alright, then we have this page. Not a day passes that I don't question myself about what lies just ahead and whether or not I can make it happen like it's supposed to be. Now, near the end of my 79th year, each day tests me in a different way, and I know that before too long, I'll make my last flight to where even memory itself will never have been. Sooner or later, each of us will be nothing but the leftovers of history or an asterisk in a book that was never written. So now I sit here, past midnight, beside my juniper fire, reflecting back to the year when my awareness took its first steps. So, we're gonna have a chat about this. Not a day passes that I don't question myself about what lies just ahead and whether or not I can make it happen the way that he's supposed to. I really think not only is this talking about his life and his imminent death, but he's also talking about hiding the treasure, right? How he's just thinking about it, or he was thinking about it. Now, near the end of my 79th year. Now, Forrest says that the reason why he says that he was 79 or 80 is because he didn't want people to narrow down when he had hit it and then get a hold of car rental agencies and be able to scrub through their records to find out when he rented a car and how many miles he had driven. So that's why he says he hit it when he was 79 or 80 years old. Don't go looking anywhere that a 79 or 80-year-old man couldn't go. However, right here, we have just confirmed that he's 79 years old. He was 79 years old. There's no way he could have been 80 when he hit it. And he says that it took him 6 weeks to write this book, right? So, and the treasure was already hidden. The treasure was hidden when the book was published. So, that means he had to have been 79. I mean, technically it could mean that he was 78, but it wasn't 80. So I think that he was 79 years old. And when he's saying, now near the end of my 79th year, about what lies just ahead and whether or not I can make it happen. He's talking about where to hide the treasure chest, and the fact that he's getting older. He's wondering if he's going to be able to make it to that location in order to make it happen like it's supposed to. Okay? Not a day passes that I don't question myself about what lies just ahead and whether or not I can make it happen. What is it? Right? Like it's supposed to. Now, near the end of my 79th year, again, he was 79 when he hid the treasure, each day tests me in a different way, and I know that before too long, I'll make my last flight to where even memory itself will never have been. So, he's looking towards the end. He's wondering if he can make it happen the way it's supposed to, and he's thinking about it every day. He's 79 years old, and he's talking about making his last flight to where even memory itself will have never been. Now, if we go back, we get to this part, and it's right here. Okay. At Borders the next day, it was still raining, so I just wandered around the store. I didn't spend much time in the children's section or cooking or travel. Finally, I found the area I was looking for and pulled out Catcher in the Rye. It was an average-looking book about the size of the two I'd thrown in the trash, but it seemed better to me because I didn't expect much from it. He had never been to the hiding place prior to hiding the treasure. He knew where he wanted to hide it, but I don't necessarily know he had ever been there. And this is why he's talking about making his last flight to where even memory itself has never been. Right? He could be referring to making his last flight to the afterlife, and memory's never been there because you take your memory with you or whatever. Nobody's been able to come back and tell their memories of the afterlife or whatever. And I don't think that's the case at all. Well, I mean, obviously it is the case, but it's a double meaning. Sooner or later, each of us will be nothing but the leftovers of history or an asterisk in a book that was never written. So now I sit here past midnight beside my juniper fire, reflecting back to the year when my awareness took its first steps. I think he's sitting there after midnight at the location where he hid the treasure, and he's burning a juniper fire, and he's reflecting back on what he just did, and also his life. So maybe the treasure is somewhere where there's junipers, right? Or else where would he be getting juniper wood to have a juniper fire? Right? He's not talking about how he's in his living room. He's not talking about how he's at his fireplace. But he's saying all this stuff that sure sounds a heck of a lot like his treasure hiding story. Man, I wanted to go so much longer than this. I took way too long on this chapter. So I'm probably going to shut it down. I am curious to see how many people we have in this room, though. See what we got going on. Oh no, is it not gonna let me see it? Oh, 51 watching? That's awesome. I'm really digging the fact that more people are coming into my live streams and stuff. Alright, so this is where I do my usual blah blah blah, subscribe to my channel. But seriously, if you are in the chat right now, or you're watching this and you haven't subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. Send me your emails about topic ideas, about your thoughts or whatever, anything that you want me to cover. Going into into a couple. I talked about these treasure hunting videos that I want to start getting made. Like expanding beyond just Fenn treasure. So I've got my OBS working. To a certain point, right? I got got some screens and stuff, another little logo and whatnot. This is supposed to have a eventually there will be live chat, on the screen and whatnot. But anyways, what I'm trying to get across is I have the technology now to do interviews. So on a treasure hunting website that I'm a part of, not just Fenn Treasure, like the Fenn Treasure sites, actual treasure hunting websites, I reached out, tried finding interviewees, that know a lot about treasures in their state. And I was able to get a hold of somebody from Alaska that apparently has been treasure hunting in Alaska his whole life and knows all the legends and is more than willing to come onto the channel. So I know I talked about the first episode was going to be about, or the first video was going to be about the Superstition Mountains and the Lost Dutchman gold mine, but I'm probably going to focus more on Alaska. On top of that, my next focus is to get a GoPro, so that way I can bring you guys on my daily metal detecting hunts. It's usually never like something fantastic, like all the people that are just crushing it on YouTube, finding an old coin every day. They're definitely planting their stuff, no doubt about it. Either that or they got some like virgin territory that nobody's ever been to. But my guess is the first one. But that way I can try to bring the treasure hunting experience, directly to you guys watching. Whether it's telling treasure stories around our little imaginary campfire, bringing you guys with me metal detecting, doing some thrift store shopping, some coin roll hunting, that type of stuff. Just trying to find any old silver, gold, whatever. Sometimes people get rid of stuff and they didn't know what they have. Going to yard sales and finding real silverware, and the people are selling it for whatever because they don't care or they don't know. People do the same thing, drop that stuff off at Goodwill, bring it to thrift stores, so on and so forth. So that is my plan that I plan on doing. So if any of that sounds fun to you guys, or that you could see yourself interested in watching, then subscribe to the channel and enable notifications. Like I've already told you guys, I can't grow this channel without your guys' support and contribution and topic ideas and stuff like that. I don't think any channel has grown without their viewers. So hit the subscribe, hit notifications, like the video, tell your friends about it. If there's any like-minded people, somebody that might be interested in treasure hunting or metal detecting or whatever, let them know about it, so that way, we can get it, get the channel out there, get more people in this, this search for riches community. For me, like, not only the Forrest Fenn treasure, but it is the thrill of the chase. Even before Forrest Fenn's treasure, I was always chasing after, riches. It's thrilling going to the thrift store shop and finding a gold ring that's mixed in with copper or costume jewelry and stuff like that. So it definitely is fun. Drives my wife nuts, but it's fun. So yeah, everything that I just said, like, subscribe, enable notifications. Also, again, like I said, I couldn't do it without your guys' help. I just want to say thanks one more time to Steve Klein and TTOTC. I have no idea who TTOTC is, but if you're watching, know who I'm talking about. They both sent me donations, and that helped go towards my my microphone that I'm using right now. Hopefully you guys can tell that I'm using one. And my camera, I'm actually using a nice webcam instead of my phone, and that'll allow me to do these these channel transitions and back screens and whatnot. My next plan is to do the whole green screen deal or whatever, just kind of have fun with it. But even though it is fun, it also there's costs associated with it, so I kind of have to look at the outlook of like, is my channel growing enough to invest this and this into it? That I'm trying to find the happy medium of everything. So again, for those two that sent contributions towards me, I really appreciate it. If anybody else wants to, the PayPal link will be in the thing, but honestly, all I expect is, or not even expect, my biggest request from you guys is, to just subscribe and show your support throughout the chats or comments or emails or whatever. But yeah, I am going to, let me scroll right through here in the chat. I know I told you guys to @RodneyGreenway me, so I'm going to see if... Alright, Mary Green says, Salinger books are important not because of the plots, it's the character development that makes a good book. Yeah, I think that's... Yeah, there was a big character development in Catcher in the Rye with Holden Caulfield. I think finally towards the end, the whole time he was trying to stay like... He was pure and innocent, but trying to act like a bad boy type deal, and finally he it's like he was trying to keep everybody from growing up, but tried acting like a grown up all the time. Obviously there's more to it than that, but 44 watching. Alright, I'm not seeing many @RodneyGreenways. I would love to to just sit in here and read all these, and I do if I ever go back and rewatch the video. Thanks for reading the Thrill of Chase bids. Yeah, I'm glad that you guys like it for sure. But yeah, that's about all I have for you guys tonight. I know it took forever between the first video and this one. This software that I've been dealing with has like taken up so many hours to figure it out to the amateur point that I have it figured out right now. But yeah, hopefully I can turn around and get the next one out quicker. Next thing that we'll be reading is First Grade. It's a pretty short chapter, so we'll probably be able to knock out, First Grade and No Place for Biddies. Heck, we might even be able to get jump starting the learning curve after that. And I think a couple of those are actually on the PDF, the online PDF, so I can pull it up on the screen and share my screen with you guys so you can actually see it while I'm reading through it. But yeah, Steve Klein says, well, it's late, but I'm going to rewatch it. Well, I just gave you a shout out, Steve Klein, so I appreciate it. Alright, guys, that's it for now. I hope you guys have a good night and enjoyed the video, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Alright, later.